Hello, welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for UnCensored, Protect Knowledge Exploration in Our Communities. This webinar was brought to you by the following sponsors: the American Association of University Women, Naperville, Illinois branch, the Illinois National Organization for Women, the National Council of Jewish Women, Chicago North Shore section, and the League of Women Voters, Naperville. We couldn't have done this without them. To begin this conversation about censorship, it is only appropriate to start with a land acknowledgement. The land upon which I am giving this presentation from is the unceded ancestral territory of the Kickapoo, Peoria, Kaskaskia, Potawatomi, Mianmami, and Sioux nations. I believe that truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers, and therefore recognize the forced removal of these Native nations and their ensuing struggles for survival and identity. Please take a moment to consider the violence, displacement, migration, colonization, and settlement that has happened on this land and neighboring lands, as well as our present participation in these legacies. To learn more, please visit the link of nativeland.ca. We have a packed agenda for tonight, so we're going to start with a little bit of housekeeping. Please add questions in the question and answer feature or in the chat. We will have time for the panelists to answer at the end of the presentation. We will also be sending a huge list of resources and a recording of the webinar, which will be shared in a follow-up email. So we will begin with a brief history of book banning, then learn about the perspectives of public libraries, school libraries, publishers, and bookstores, ending with a question and answer with the panelists. I am Shoshana Frank. My pronouns are she, her. I am a creative, passionate social change warrior, community leader, and activist. My recent activism is focused on reproductive justice, paid family leave, gender-affirming legislation, and educational initiatives. I'm a librarian and hold an MA in International Public Policy and an MLIS from Dominican University. I'm a 2022 LIFS National Council of Jewish Women Leader and a 2022 American Library Association Emerging Leader. I enjoy going on adventures and one day hope to visit all 7 continents. So I know you're here to learn, I know you're here due to the growing concern about book banning that is happening in increasing frequency. However, I wanted to place today in a historical context because unfortunately, this is not a new phenomenon. So we're just focusing on the history of the United States tonight, which starting in 1650, where one of the earliest records of book banning was a pamphlet arguing anyone who was obedient to God could go to heaven, as this challenged the dominant Puritan Calvinist belief. There was outrage, book burnings, and bannings. Then carrying on, fast forwarding in history to the 1850s to 1860s, book banning both in the North and South focused on removing and restricting information that was in contrast to the prevailing narrative, either pro or anti-slavery. But that same theme of removing literature because it might expose people to another viewpoint or open their minds continued from the 1600s. Then in 1873 until 1936, the Comstock Act was put into law, which criminalized the activities of both birth control advocates and restricted the dissemination of knowledge about contraception and sexuality, which predominantly was to women, the people most impacted by the extremely high infant and maternal mortality rates at the time. Fast forward a little bit more to the 1920s in Boston, the elite residents petitioned against books that they found objectionable, sued booksellers, and even tried to bring criminal charges against authors. In the 20th century, parents began requesting that their kids' schools ban books that challenged longstanding narratives about American history, social norms, slavery, and the Civil War. There were other books that were challenged due to the language, sexual or political content, such as socialism or communism. In the 1950s McCarthy era of censorship, many librarians started to band together to fight against government oppression and censorship in general. But it wasn't until 1982 that they created Banned Book Week that's still celebrated today. Also in 1982, the US Supreme Court argued in favor of the students and free speech in the Island Trees Union Free School District versus Pico, stating that school boards could not remove books because they objected to the content alone. Present-day book bannings are focused on stories featuring LGBTQ+ issues or protagonists, along with storylines about race and racism, sexual content or sexual assault, and death and grief. As you can see on the screen, from July 2021 until March of 2022, there were over 1,000 books banned across 86 school districts, impacting more than 2 million students. Although Texas is leading the charge against books, its 713 bans were nearly double that of any other state. So you may be thinking, Shoshana, this seems really depressing and unchangeable. Why are you telling us all of this? Well, never fear. We have 4 panelists who are about to provide actionable steps we can take towards censorship, towards stopping censorship in our communities. First up is Barbara Posinger, Director of Sandwich Public Library District. Barbara has served a total of 7 years at the Sandwich Library and is going on 4 years as director. She received her master's in Library and Information Science from Dominique University in 2015. As a lifelong lover of books, libraries have been a consistent source of passion and joy for Barbara. She delights in building relationships with the Sandwich community, thoroughly enjoys participating in lively and eye-opening conversations about novels, and along with her remarkable team, dedicates herself to doing everything she can to help the library grow. Take it away, Barbara.
All right, here we go. Thank you so much for that introduction, Shoshana. And let me start sharing my screen here. All right. All right. Does everything look good? Can you see my screen? Shoshana, can you
Looks great.
Awesome. All right. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in tonight. My goal for this section of the webinar is for you to all walk away with an arsenal of foundational and effective methods that will help you support and protect knowledge accessibility in public libraries specifically. I sincerely hope that you're able to find value in some of these ideas that I'm presenting. And again, as Shoshana had said before, we have lots of things to send you after, so please don't worry about taking any notes. So a little bit of background about me, as Shoshana said. My name is Barbara Posinger, and I do have my master's degree also from Dominican University. And I've been the director since 2020. Now, Sandwich Library in particular is actually fairly small. We serve a population of just under 8,000 people. And gratefully, since I've been there, we haven't faced any very significant book challenges, but we have had our fair share of complaints, stolen items, and damaged items, all based off of content. So even still, I've always felt that it's best to be as prepared as possible for the most difficult situation, because it really could happen anytime and anywhere. So Shoshana gave an exceptional little background there about censorship history. And it's clearly no secret, as she mentioned, that there's been a massive increase in challenge books in the past few years. And as she said, according to ALA data, there has been 729 attempts to censor library resources just last year, targeting over 1,500 books. Just think about that number, 1,500 books. And it was the highest number of attempted book bans since ALA began compiling these lists over 2 decades ago. So why is this happening? There's an assortment of reasons, I'm sure, and nobody can really pinpoint one or another, but it is no secret that we're living in really stressful times. America is politically divided, and everyone is dealing with trauma from a global pandemic. So times are tense, opinions are strong, and emotions are high. And for these reasons and more, it's not surprising that we've seen book challenges grow. So I've always felt it's our responsibility as librarians and supporters of knowledge accessibility to do what we can to face these potential challenges confidently, but more importantly, effectively. And so I've compiled a list of 5 action-based methods that I feel are the most effective for public libraries in particular to protect knowledge accessibility. And I'll go over each of these individually. So first, we have a clarity of purpose. Now, at first glance, this method might seem like it wouldn't be as significant as maybe others that you could think of, but if you really sit down and consider it, you might have a different experience. So your library's mission should function as the foundational concept of everything that your library is. It should be a part of every decision that's made and be the basis for every solution to the problems you face. It's the library's sole purpose, and understanding the mission is absolutely critical to the success of your library. So ask yourself, do you know what your library's mission is? Do you know if you have one at your library? And what is your understanding of the mission? If you know, that's wonderful. But does your board know it? Does your staff? Is this a common thing you discuss regularly? And might these other people involved have a different perspective of what the mission actually means from yours? Is it clear to your community what your mission is? So all of these questions should have a same easy answer. And if they don't, issues such as materials challenges may not be handled as effectively as they could. Having a clarity of purpose can be an invaluable tool to aid in the protection of knowledge accessibility. It unites all of these parts together. And if anyone tries to challenge materials, you can refer right back to that mission and explain how having that item meets your library's purpose. Now, if staff, management, and the board all have the same understanding of that mission, the response would be solid, unanimous, and very difficult to contest. Number 2. A clear, strong collection development policy is, in my opinion, the best protection and defense public libraries can have when dealing with censorship attempts. The policy should specifically include sections for selection criteria and a detailed material review process, among others. Now, if you encounter a challenge, staff can refer back to this policy and review it with the patron. They can go over the selection process criteria, which should support the purchase of the challenged item at hand. It can be further explained that all policies are board approved, and thus this material purchase should fall under a proper guiding principle. Now, of course, some patrons may still be unhappy and want to pursue things further. And if that's the case, staff can move forward with the material review process. This process is the most important thing. It should outline a step-by-step procedure that begins with a form for reconsideration of materials. The form should include options for patron info, the challenge title info, and detailed reasoning as to why the patron feels that this title should be reconsidered. Once that form's complete, you could then submit it for formal review to the proper channel. Depending on the size of your library, that could either be the director or a department head. So then the material would be vetted by the professional source, and the outcome would then be communicated to the patron. And hopefully that outcome would always be to maintain that that item can stay in your collection. Now, still, patrons might still be unhappy with that result. And if that's the case, they can be directed to bring the complaint to the board at their next public meeting. Now, at this point, enough time would have passed that ample communication about the situation should be occurring about the material with the reviewer, the director, and the board. Ideally, the board would review all of the appropriate documentation as well as the challenge material for themselves. All three would thus be effectively prepared to respond to the complainant if in fact they do decide to take that next step. So there you have it. If a challenge occurs, a detailed policy and review process will definitely help you to prepare and manage for all of these challenges that potentially could be encountered. Number 3, prepare and train staff for potential scenarios. So ensuring that staff is prepared as possible to handle a materials challenge is going to be the most effective first line of protection for you. They will be the first ones to encounter the issue and should be adequately prepared to do so by being meticulously trained in the collection development policy and material review process. This should be reviewed with staff on an annual basis so that it will stay fresh in everybody's mind and they know what to expect as it happens. During annual training days, you could do this, and you can also practice mock scenarios. So there's some experience in a live setting and they could get some, experience doing that. You could also put together a list of additional resources for support, such as ALA, ILA. There are a bunch of local offices of intellectual freedom, and all of these resources could help staff find appropriate help and support if they find themselves in a situation where maybe management isn't available and they're stuck dealing with the situation on their own. Number 4, audit your collection regularly. So at my library, the damaging and stealing of materials that we've encountered has proven to be a more subtle approach towards censorship than traditionally more direct attempts, but ultimately it achieves the same goal. It is more difficult, however, to maintain and protect collection accessibility if you're not aware of what items this abuse is happening to or when. Some censorship strategies have really gotten pretty sneaky, so it's important to watch out for those and be able to keep up with it if it's happening. So by keeping up to date with book challenge trends, you can develop a regular auditing schedule to ensure your potentially challengeable books remain safe and whole in circulation. If you don't audit, you may never know what might be missing and would then lose the opportunity to replace, repair, and maintain access of those really important materials. If there comes a time when a particular book is being challenged, as was the case with the Dr. Seuss titles not too long ago that I'm sure a lot of us remember, you can temporarily pull them from circulation until the craze dies down, or adjust them to a temporary in-house reference item section. So you can still allow access to them for patrons, but they cannot leave the library building. And lastly, number 5, educate your community. Fairly obvious, but imperative just the same. Offering opportunities to educate the community on intellectual freedom will never fail you. You may be surprised and end up finding new allies, in the community that you didn't expect. Encouraging these conversations can inspire new points of view that expand perspectives. And there are so many different ways to do this, both active and passive ways. Some very basic active efforts include programming and even working on collaborations with local businesses and organizations that support your mission. Passive efforts: social media posts, polls, in-house literature, displays, web pages. The options are endless, and you can be as creative as you possibly can be with it. So those are the nice action-based methods for public libraries in general. And I hope that you now feel a little more prepared to handle materials challenges and protect knowledge accessibility from that standpoint. But there are also many ways to invite your community to help support you and maintain intellectual freedom from them. So some options that I would encourage our community members to do that would actively participate as an ally to their library are: read the books. Read those books that are constantly being banned or challenged. Learn the context, understand what those messages are as a whole, and you're going to be able to be as informed as you possibly can to respond to those challenges. Stay informed. Keep up to date on currently challenged materials. Look for and read current news articles about the topic, and pay attention to how your peers and your community is reacting towards the idea of material challenges. And a lot of people I don't think know this one, but you can report banned or challenged books to ALA and ILA. They have tools available on their website, and be sure to utilize them if you hear about or experience a materials challenge that occurs around your neck of the woods. The more data there is, the more prepared public libraries can be across the state and the nation to respond to these challenges. You can also submit materials requests for banned or challenged books at your local library. So if you notice that a popularly challenged book is not available at your library, you could submit a request to that library to purchase a copy. 9 times out of 10, they'll do that for you. So this helps the library have support from their community to help watch their collection and make sure that accessibility to those materials are available. You can also attend library and community board meetings. If you are aware that a challenge is happening at your library, you can make your voice just as loud as the challenger and show support for your library as a representative of your community. So that's the gist of my presentation. I know it was very content heavy for how short it was, but as mentioned earlier, an email will go out with a bunch of helpful resources and examples for the policies and forms that I discussed. And I hope that it'll help you have everything you need if you want to try some of these ideas out. So lastly, thank you again for tuning in, and I hope you were able to take one or a few or all of these ideas home with you and that you found them valuable. My contact information will be sent out as well in case you have any questions, and have a wonderful night, everybody.
That was fabulous, Barbara. Thank you so much for providing so much insight into public libraries.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you.
So our next panelist is Dr. Kristina Weber. She's a school librarian at Hampshire High School and has 18 years of teaching experience. She serves as ISLE's Intellectual Freedom Chair, as a member of AASL/ALA's School Public Library Cooperation Committee, and as president of the Fox River Valley Public Library District's Board of Trustees. She holds a PhD in instructional technology from Northern Illinois University. Dr. Weber lives in the northwest suburbs of Chicago with her husband, 2 sons, and their Shih Tzu, Bowie. Take it away, Dr. Weber.
Thanks, Shoshana. All right. So I'd like to start by talking a little bit about our role in the school.
Excuse me, Dr. Weber, really quickly. We can't see your slides.
Oh, weird. I thought I hit that. Okay, now you can, right?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Okay. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the school librarian's role in the schools. It's hard to talk about what it is we do without talking about what we do. So we are the school's experts in information literacy, media literacy, intellectual freedom, copyright, books, and privacy. We are also guided by the ALA Code of Ethics and the Library Bill of Rights, and also the ISAIL standards and the Illinois School Library standards. We are teachers. We have teaching certificates in the age group in which we teach. And we also have master's degrees in library science with endorsements in library information specialist for schools. And that includes coursework in equitable collection development and other things. We follow laws that are in place in both public libraries and school libraries to protect student privacy with regard to library book checkout choices and history. You know, just as your book checkout history is private to you, the students are to them. And studies consistently show that when students have access to a certified school librarian, reading scores improve. So the things that we do in the school really do help our students. And we service the entire school population. You know, a classroom teacher works with their students. We work with everyone in the school. So we're incredibly passionate about the idea of books as mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. So mirrors, the idea that every student should be able to see themselves positively reflected in the books that they read. They should be able to see protagonists that look like them, have the same experiences as them, not just supporting characters or non-existent characters. And then also books as windows to be able to experience what other people are going through, see what everyone else deal with, etc. And then the idea of sliding glass doors, being able to open that window, walk in and walk a mile in someone else's shoes, really experience it as though it were you. The woman who came up with the idea of mirrors, windows, sliding glass doors said that the most amazing windows are the ones where you end up seeing yourself reflected back, where the window becomes a mirror. So that's where we're coming from. The reality is that, as we've heard before, we have seen a higher than ever number of book challenges and bans, and our main targets that we're seeing are LGBTQ plus representation, storylines about race or racism, and storylines about sex or sexuality. And our other presenters could probably tell you more than I can. We are seeing representation in the literature that's being published is so much better than it ever has been. The number of books that we have access to that really give us those windows into the experiences of minority populations, of LGBTQ plus populations, is amazing, and it's getting really great. And with that comes the challenges. On the list of the top 10 most challenged books of 2021, only one, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, is not representative of that. And so that's something that we really are striving to fight against. So when we talk about intellectual freedom for students, we are trying to build students' capacity for independent inquiry and development of who they are as readers. Given that, it's not our job to get between a child and their parent. So if a student comes to me, and this happened last week, a student comes to me and says, Dr. Weber, I'm looking for fantasy. I'd like a new fantasy book, but my mom and dad are really religious and they don't want me reading anything about witches or wizards or magic. So can you help me find a fantasy book that doesn't include magic? And I did. I worked with that student, found a book that would fit within what his and his parents' expectations were. But it's also not our job to monitor his choices for or instead of his parent. So our collections have two purposes. The first is to support the curriculum, to extend the curriculum, to extend what students are learning in class, and then also to support independent reading, independent inquiry, to help build that capacity so that students are figuring out who they are as readers and who they are as learners. And we're not injecting our own opinions into that. We are trained to leave our personal feelings behind and purchase books and build our collections for all points of view, so that students have that time and space to build that capacity. And as Shoshana mentioned, there are two laws that really support us in that there are two Supreme Court cases that really support us in that endeavor. The first is Tinker v. Des Moines, which stated that teachers and students do not give up their First Amendment rights at the school doors. And then Island Trees Union School District v. Pico, where the school board may not remove books from a school library just because they don't like the ideas contained in those books. And that's where those challenge policies and procedures come into play. This trend that we're seeing is not organic. It's not a grassroots thing. It is coordinated, organized, funded, strategic. There are groups that are putting materials together for people in their communities to be able to run with. Form letter book challenge materials, places to submit FOIA documents from school districts. That's Freedom of Information Act information that they get from school districts. And there are websites where you can look at a book title and they will break down for you page by page what they find objectionable about that book. They count up any profanity within the books, give them a rating on a scale that they've decided on. So it's slick. Like, there is a lot out there now for these organizations to pull from. There's also legislation that we're seeing come across, and legislation can be contagious. So we're not seeing it in Illinois, but we are definitely cognizant of it. So just to the south in Missouri now, as of August, librarians can face a fine and up to 1 year in prison for helping kids to find a graphic novel deemed inappropriate. School librarians in Missouri are reporting that school administrators are preemptively removing all graphic novels from school library collections because of this law. And they have a new one that they're working to get passed through now called the Protection of Minors Rule for libraries, which would require all school libraries to get their collection development policies approved by the state library. And the Secretary of State is also the state librarian. So the Secretary of State would be in charge of deciding whether or not those collection development policies meet the expectations. It also will prohibit state funds from being used to buy any materials deemed inappropriate or age inappropriate, and from being displayed in areas predominantly serving minors. We're noticing that the term inappropriate is becoming a stand-in for things that people find make them uncomfortable, or things that they don't like. So that inappropriate word really is losing some of its meaning. In Illinois, we're seeing coordinated FOIA requests. So in the area that I teach in, all of the school districts in the northwest suburbs all received the same FOIAs at the same time. So this one was for 5 specific titles, purchase dates, if they were weeded from the collections, weeding dates, how many copies we had. A few months ago, we received a FOIA for a listing of every single book that we had with LGBTQ characters or themes. Librarians across the state are seeing social media pressure in parent Facebook groups and pressure from school administrators to not rock the boat by doing things like celebrating Banned Books Week. So I've heard from a number of school librarians across the state that they're not allowed to celebrate Banned Books Week anymore. And then the big, I mean, they're all big problems, but the biggest problem is that every year in Illinois, we're losing school librarians. Districts are cutting the number of school librarians that they have. This came in my mailbox yesterday at home, so I thought I would share this with you. It's called the Kane County Reporter, and this full page spread on a number of book titles that they find objectionable. At the top, now they're all high school books, but at the top you see 2 elementary aged children reading. And it says, Illinois public school teachers who once recommended Nancy Drew-like mysteries, historical fiction to book-loving students are being encouraged to promote a new emerging genre, child sexualization, which isn't true. But this is part of the coordinated, organized, funded stuff that I was talking about. So how can you help? You can show support for school libraries and school librarians on social media. It means so much and does so much for perception, just for us to be seen and for community members and parents to put the word out there that they really support their libraries and their librarians. There's nothing in the school code that states that every school should have a school librarian. So our organization, ISLE, is really focused on trying to get that changed. So you can write to your state representative and state senator and tell them to add school librarians to the school code. Tell your school principal and superintendent that it's important to fund school librarians, school libraries and certified librarians. You can organize the parents in your community that don't believe in banning books, and that's most of them. 8 out of 10 parents, regardless of political affiliation, do not support banning books. So the more we can organize and raise those voices, the better off we'll all be. When there's a challenge, rally around your school librarian. They probably feel as though they're on an island alone. You know, in schools, most teachers have departments or teams, but we're there by ourselves. So we can feel a little bit lonely at times when we're fighting the good fight. And remember, when we advocate for these things, it looks like it's for our own self-interest. Even though we know that this is all such important stuff. When you fight for these things, they'll listen, and it would make all the difference in the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kristina, for so much detail about school libraries and their functions, as well as actionable things that we can do. So next up, we have Dominique Raccah, who is the publisher and CEO of Sourcebooks, the company she founded in 1987. Widely recognized as a leader in innovation, Dominique was named Publishers Weekly Person of the Year in 2016. Sourcebooks proudly publishes as an array of new, diverse voices, many of which are regularly banned and challenged across the U.S. for their thought-provoking content that challenges norms and changes lives. Sourcebooks produces everything from adult and teen fiction to children's books, college guides, calendars, and more. The company has over 200 employees and is proud to be one of the top book publishers in America, with numerous bestsellers to its credit. It is the largest women-owned book publisher in the country and the largest trade book publisher in Chicago. Thank you for joining us, Dominique.
Thank you so much, Shoshana. And before I say anything else, I really have to thank Dr. Weber and Ms. Posinger, Barbara, just for an absolutely riveting conversation and information. I'm just really amazing. So hopefully you can see my deck. Just let me know if you can't. And if I'm very lucky, I will actually get the view to work. And does that work for everybody?
Looks great.
Great. All right, super. I'm gonna just start off by talking a little bit about who we are, because it's just well, we are I started the company out of my spare bedroom with no money, no employees, and no understanding of what book publishing was. So we've been in business since 1987. We are today, as Shoshana said, we are the 8th largest book publisher in the country. We are the largest woman-owned book publisher, people tell me, in the world. We are many things, and we have, so for example, this week we happen to have 6 books on the New York Times bestsellers list, a novel, 3 picture books, and 2 middle grade titles. So lots of different kinds of books. We publish lots of different kinds of books, and yeah, we've won every innovation award that the industry gives. So today, I'm gonna talk a little bit about book banning, because publishing today is really an incredible place to be, and the current campaign to ban books is alarming, and lots of other adjectives that I won't use in this particular place. And I think that independent publishers like ourselves have a unique role in this fight. So I'm going to illustrate some of what I'm going to talk about by talking about Gertrude Beasley, who is probably a person you have never heard of. And that is by design. She escaped a horrifically abusive childhood in extreme poverty in rural Texas. And despite many odds, in 1918, she earned a master's from the University of Chicago and worked as a journalist. The lifetime of abuse and gender-based violence that Gertrude, her mother, and her 12 siblings endured caused her to be an outspoken advocate for women's rights, for birth control, for abortion, for divorce, and for socialism. As you can imagine, Gertrude's experiences and opinions were inconvenient for many. Politicians, law enforcement, religious leaders made it their mission to hide her story from the American public, because they knew, just like book banners today know, that when no one is confronted with hard truths, no one will ask why. And when no one asks why, there's no reason to believe anything is wrong. Gertrude feared no one and unapologetically shared her reality and that of many others who lacked the resources to speak up. She published her memoir, My First 30 Years, in 1925 through a very small publisher in Paris, France. The book was banned upon publication. It raised many high-profile eyebrows in England, where she was living at the time, and within 2 years, she was deported back to the United States. Most print copies of the book were destroyed by Scotland Yard and US Customs, and the few that made it into Texas were pulled off shelves by, I know you won't believe this, but true, armed Texas Rangers. Days after her arrival in New York, she was committed to a mental institution against her will. A fiery journalist and world traveler with a master's degree from the University of Chicago, she languished in this asylum for 28 years until her death in 1955. There's a scene in My First 30 Years in which Gertrude's abused, world-weary, and impoverished mother breaks down and tells her how different their lives could have been And at that point, Gertrude vows, I will do something about it. I will tell, mother, I will tell. I swear, I will tell your story. Authors have the power to write honest, life-changing stories. Their publishers have the responsibility to get these stories into the hands of readers. I don't need to tell you why book banning is bad. We all know this, but I do want to reiterate that it is a real threat to our democracy. And I believe that publishers have a moral responsibility to make sure that important stories aren't erased. I publish a lot of books that get banned regularly. I published the 9th most banned book in the United States. It is also, by the way, the most stolen book in high school libraries. This book is gay. It's by the trans activist Juno Dawson, and it is stolen because kids are afraid of who will see them reading it. It has been used in so many ways. When people talk about this book, it is a profoundly life-changing book. It is a book that people have used to tell their parents they were gay. It is a book that people have used to tell their story. It is a book that people have used to find themselves. Our community of authors is incredibly resilient, and they are out there telling their stories fearlessly. This year, we've been asked to participate in and partner on more initiatives that support the right to read than we have ever before. While the number of attempts to silence voices through book banning is unprecedented, so is the number of people nationwide who are mobilizing against them. So here's my call of action to action for all of you. Do not stand by if there is a challenge in your community. We are in the vast majority. You can see the numbers. The minority are simply quite a bit louder. I encourage you to plug into organizations who are working to fight book bans, to use the many points and the many suggestions made by our two previous colleagues on the stage, and to fight book bans like our partners at the ALA. We are, by the way, we've done a 52-week guide with the ALA with the most banned books, so you can read one a week for yourselves. Or that also our partners, the National Coalition Against Censorship, with whom we work. The AAUW, who organized this webinar, will be sharing some resources from all of us who are presenting, so please do check those out. And in closing, I just want to thank you all for your dedication. Thank you for your commitment to keeping accessible the diverse experiences of our fellow human beings like Gertrude, her mother, and millions more whose stories are fighting to be told. Thank you for taking the time out of your evening to learn more about how you can join our movement to defend the right to read. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominique, for such powerful words that you help amplify by publishing these authors' perspectives. We literally wouldn't be here without publishers, so thank you. And that brings us to our next panelist, Kerry Clemm, who is the marketing manager at Anderson's Bookshop in Naperville. Anderson's is a popular independent bookseller with several stores in the western suburbs of Chicago. When not chasing 3 kids and running author events, Kerry is passionate about the topic of book banning. She has created several viral social media campaigns around the topic. Thank you for joining us, Kerry.
Thanks for having me. It's very exciting to be here. This is a topic I care deeply about, so I really appreciate you having us. having me, I should say. I'm also used to talking for the Bookshop. So like I said, my name is Kerry Clemm, and I work for Anderson's Bookshops. We have locations in Naperville and in Downers Grove. Here, I tell you guys what I do. I'm gonna have you take a look at some numbers I pulled. I am the marketing manager at Anderson's, in addition to also running any author events. If you've ever been to one, you've probably seen me. But part of what I do is manage all of Anderson's social media. And that includes being involved with and promoting and planning our banned book week promotion that we do in the store every single year. I've been doing this for about 5 years now, so I have been involved with the book banning trend and tracking trends for those promotions now for about 5 years. And as you can see, we definitely see a trend here. It's funny because as I've been posting more and more about it, people are like, why is this suddenly coming up so much? And it really is a big difference, and that's why. And we're a little different with the bookstore than, say, the schools or the libraries, because we don't necessarily have to answer to parents in quite the same way. We still get complaints, but we still also, I mean, there were people, was it Virginia, where they tried to ban a bookstore or make it illegal to sell genderqueer, but they lost. So that's great. But we were watching that one pretty nervously, actually. All right, so to start us off, because I basically get paid to argue on the internet with people about book banning through our posts that we make about book banning, I wanted to share 2 of my biggest pet peeves that I get into, that I hear over and over and over again as I argue with people in the comments of our posts. And these are 2 things that I'm going to bet that you guys hear a lot too. So I thought I would share with you some of my responses and the reason why they bother me so much. The first is, these books aren't banned. You can still buy them online and in bookstores. It's just such an embarrassing thing when people say that. Like, I feel embarrassed for them, because it is just such an elitist comment, and it's just so privileged. Obviously, a great majority of kids, more than ever before, cannot afford to purchase new books because their families can no longer afford to do that. Not all children, and I'm going to say, from my own experiences with my own children in their classrooms, the majority of children grow up in homes where reading isn't like a thing that's done or supported, and where parents limit exposure to diverse opinions. And of course, this is not new, but the great majority of American students get their literature from their school and public libraries, and they don't have other options. That's nothing new. It's always been like that, and it's still the same, probably getting more of a percentage in that boat. My second big pet peeve is, these books include topics that are inappropriate for children. And I know that was touched on earlier as well, the word inappropriate and how it can mean different things for different people. But I have a few things that I fire back when this comes up. One being, there's always been this dance that we are doing as adults with the children in our lives, especially parents and kids, where they don't want us to know that they know as much as they know, and we don't want to know that they know as much as they know. And I personally believe that divide has never been bigger than it is right now, because our children, of course, walk around with computers in their hands all day long. We know that this generation is constantly snapping inappropriate pictures to each other. They swear like truckers. So sometimes it's like nails on a chalkboard when people say, oh, that's an inappropriate topic for children, because whether we like it or it makes us uncomfortable or not, the kids are dealing with these issues and facing them every day. Another reason it really bothers me is just that I feel like it's very disrespectful to, people, educators and librarians, and then in our store, our children's team, our education director and our children's managers and our book buyers. They are experts, and they have advanced degrees in children's literature related fields, children's development. They know what they're doing, and it is our job to trust them, I believe. And then my biggest issue with this is just that it completely leaves out the entire topic of context. It just sort of throws it away. And I just feel like context is incredibly important when you're looking at something like a book, because let's take a topic like police brutality, for example. There's a lot of books that have been banned because they talk about police brutality. We are not talking about children being exposed with no context to music that is anti-police, right? We're talking about well thought out, usually personal narratives from people who have experienced those things, and they are discussing their experiences, usually in age appropriate ways. And then of course our children are guided through those difficult topics, all with the entire point being to develop empathy and critical thinking skills. It's so different than when some of these topics that make us uncomfortable are used for entertainment purposes. So those are my two biggest pet peeves. All right, now I'm going to talk a little bit about how a bookstore fights back, which is similar to a library or a school, but a little bit different. Like I said, we don't have to bow to parents the same way. We still get complaints a lot, but we don't, and we still have people who come into our store and turn books around that they do not agree with, or hide them or steal them in the same way. But like I said, we don't have to bow as much to that public pressure, which is a little bit nice for us. So we are sort of fighting back against censorship in three big ways. First of all, we have displays in our bookstores highlighting banned books and giving information about the recent upturn in banned books. And those displays have actually been up since, I think, January, if I remember correctly, and they are continuing to sell like hotcakes. I mean, nothing makes my soul happier than seeing a group of people standing around them talking about it. It's fantastic. We're also, Anderson's has had great success using social media to spread fact-driven, and I cannot stress that enough, fact-driven awareness of this issue to our large base of followers. And then, of course, one of the ways that we have that I think is a little bit unique to bookstores in general is that we have the chance to amplify the voices of so many banned authors by having them come to our store for author events. So I know schools and libraries have author events too. Anderson's, before COVID, we had 400 author events a year. Now we're about 200. We're building back up there. But it really is a great platform for authors to be heard and get to spread their message in the community. And it makes us feel really good to get to do that. So, okay, how can you help along the same way that we are? So number one, most important, always support these authors and their books by reading them. And that doesn't have to be purchasing them. That can be through your library as well. But just reading these authors, supporting the books, like telling your friends to calm down and let their kids read the books because you've read them yourself, so important. And then I wanted to talk to you guys about how you can use social media to spread fact-driven awareness. I'm going to have a couple of suggestions in the next few slides. And then, of course, arming yourself with real information from trustworthy sources. Most important thing. All right, so let's talk about successfully spreading awareness on social media. I'm going to tell you what's worked for me over the last couple of months. We've had a few pretty cool viral experiences happening at Anderson's, both on our Facebook page and TikTok, which is new to us. I think most importantly, post aesthetics, grabbing, graphics that grab people's attention and are trendy, funny or strong opening lines, and of course, short paragraphs and bulleted lists, which you're about to see. I am absolutely terrible at and break all the time that rule. Establishing yourself as a trustworthy source, very, very important. This is how you're going to connect with your user base and have them hopefully share your posts and spread information on the topic. The most important thing, of course, is to avoid emotional statements, which is very difficult when you're passionate about something. I try to avoid sarcasm in the store posts. I don't do as well in my personal posts. And then, of course, using data and facts and citing your sources. Nothing is more annoying to me on social media than when I see a strong, opinionated, written piece with no sources cited. It just makes me not want to share it because it makes me a little bit suspicious. So always make sure you cite those sources. And then, of course, allowing discourse and interact with your commenters. Avoid blocking users. Some people might be surprised to see me put that up there. I really just feel strongly that there's something wrong with banning someone off a post about book banning. Sometimes people do choose to use strong language or attack other people, in which case I give them a warning. But the reason you want to kick them off is because they then go to their little dark corners of the internet that we all know that they're gathering in. And then they start saying things like, oh, how ironic, I was kicked off a post about book banning, and it's just not worth dealing with it. I try not to feed the trolls that way. And then, of course, allowing your users to discuss with each other the topic at hand and jumping in where needed to help guide those conversations with facts. All of those things also actually help the algorithm on social media put that post in more of your followers' feeds. So interacting, lots of comments, good thing. Even the bad comments can be good. I thought that I'd give you guys a couple examples of some posts that have worked really well for us. This is a post that I believe is on our Instagram page. And for Banned Book Week this year, we have something called Blind Date with a Book in the bookstore that we do for Christmas as gifts. They're very cool. And for Valentine's Day. And so we kind of gave it a banned book makeover for Banned Book Week this year. We made a cute little graphic about it. We put it up, and then we used the post to then spread more information and give updates on what's going on with banned books. And it was really successful for us. And also we sold out of those, of course. We always do though with the blind date with the book. Some of you may have seen this. This is what I was talking about with getting on board trends to kind of grab people's attention. This is a really popular meme right now. If you haven't seen it going around, like of people saying they're finding silly stuff inside their kids' candy. And so we gave it a little banned books makeover. I just threw it into Canva and made it. And it got a great response and lots of conversation again starting, and another chance for us to be like, hey, here's a resource you can look at, or here's some information we're sharing, an update to like get people still engaged with this topic. Because obviously the best way to beat this is to have as many people caring as possible. And here's just an example of one of our Facebook posts. And that right there, and also behind me here is the banned book display that we have put up in the bookshop. And then we did something new this year. I don't know if I can pull it up from here. Hold on. It is not letting me pull it up. I'm sorry. And it's also going the wrong way. But we had a viral TikTok, and it was really successful for us. And I highly recommend you get on TikTok if you haven't already. There's something called Book Talk on there, and people are talking a lot about banned books. So we jumped in there, we made a TikTok, we made a list of some of the most banned books. We set it to a fun song, and that was kind of powerful. And we ended up getting 275,000 views. So that reached a lot of people, and the discussion in the comments was amazing. So I just can't recommend that highly enough. Even though doing TikTok is still terrifying to me, even though it's been months. All right, so getting back to how I said that you guys could help, I said make sure that you are properly informed from resources that you can really trust. Here's a few that I like. These are my favorites. I use this all the time when I am putting together displays and social media posts for the store. American Library Association, obviously. PEN America is actually my favorite, pen.org, if you go over there and check them out. They actually collect data about banned books in real time, which is really nice because the ALA's data tends to be about a year behind. So this is a great chance to get a look at what's going on really currently and get your most up-to-date facts. Book Riot, they have a newsletter that comes out once a week, and they do a roundup of censorship news from around the country with news articles. So I share a lot of those on our social media. And then the American Booksellers Association, of course. And then our own, we have put together a list of our favorite banned books that we have in stock, and it's hard to keep them in stock right now, which is a good thing. And we always have that up on our website. It's been up for about a year, and it's still selling like crazy. And it's a great place to go and look for gifts too, always. And we have all age groups up there, all types of books. All right. And that is it for me. That's kind of like on the bookstore side. One thing that you can always be doing to help support bookstores is, of course, to follow us on all our social medias. And of course, I have to put it up because it's my job. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Kerry. I always find it fascinating to see how different mediums, whether it's libraries, publishers, or booksellers, are able to engage in the same topic. So I'm going to ask all of our panelists to turn their cameras back on, because we have some time for some question and answers. So let's get started with, let's see. So this question could be for Barbara or Kristina. What advice do you give a library or school board trustee when a resident asks or demands you remove a book or books from a library or school library? What should the trustee say?
In my opinion, I would say that they should go back to the library's mission. Knowing what that mission is the entire purpose of your library. So being able to recognize that and proving how that book supports that mission kind of goes into supporting your entire identity as a library. And you could also refer to the library's Bill of Rights and Library Code of Ethics, which someone else here mentioned earlier, and I really appreciated that. So you can always go back to that, because the sole purpose of library is providing information, access to information from any point of view.
Just to add to that, it's important to really understand what my job as a trustee is. And it is not to really stick my thumb on to things like that. It's to follow, to push that toward the set policies and procedures. So if a resident came to me with something like that, I would definitely push them toward our incredible library staff who really, they have a procedure in place and they know what to do with it.
Awesome, thank you. We had a question for the whole group. Do any of you have banned book clubs? If so, any tips on what has worked well to garner participation and conversation?
It is definitely something I think we would love to do at the bookstore. Coming back from COVID, we have shortened hours and we're really short-staffed. And so it's definitely on the dream list, but something we haven't been able to put in motion. But we definitely get demand for it.
We've put together with the American Library Association put together a reading list of banned books. And we worked with them to create a journal that has reading group kind of reading, it's questions, right? So that you can have conversations around those. So that's available. But just so you know, the ALA's got a ton of materials that you could use to really form a really good book club, I think.
Dominique, I bought that book.
We've done a bunch of stuff with the ALAs and they've been amazing partners. So it's really, I saw them. Yeah, they're amazing.
They are.
We also have it on the dream list. We're so small and we have a staff of 10. So it's very difficult to have as many book clubs as ideally we would like. But we do celebrate Banned Books Week every year. And during that month, which is September, we always try to read a banned book in our general book club.
Awesome. It sounds like we have some future banned book discussions in the works. So for Dominique, do you feel other publishing houses are shying away from controversial authors or titles?
Yes. I think, but I think it's happening everywhere. So forgive me. I think that booksellers and librarians, we're all on, I mean, everybody's on the front lines and so I think everyone to some extent is self-censoring, right? They're pulling books off shelves before they get pulled. They're as much as I would like to say that there's 100% of people who are, who are fighting this fight. I think it's a hard fight to fight. So I do think that there are folks who are choosing to not publish certain things because of potential controversy, for sure.
Yeah, you're right. It's a hard ask to
It
ask
really is.
people to fight this fight, right?
And I have to say, I was so impressed by your presentation, Dr. Weber, and the fact that we're gonna put librarians possibly in jail. What kind of crazy country are we talking about? I'm sorry, to everybody who's listening, I actually had some adjectives that I took out of that sentence. But I mean, what the, really?
No need to apologize to any of us. I think we all feel the same.
It is definitely mind-boggling. It was something that was happening in the 1920s. And now that we're in the 2020s, you would have thought we would have moved past those actions. We had a question for Kristina. Is IL working with a lobbyist? Because there are representatives of other organizations on the call who would like to support adding school librarians in the school code.
Oh, wow. I know that our new president of IL is putting together a strategy and some really, her committee is doing awesome work. I am not on that committee though, so I'm not sure what they are doing, but please reach out to our president, Deb Will. If that's a possibility, we will take it.
Awesome. And again, if you can't find IL's website as we're talking here tonight, it's going to be sent out in the follow-up email, as well as Dr. Weber's contact information. So you can always follow up with her so that we can all band together to get school librarians in the school code.
Please.
So there was a question that kind of, I think, would relate to everyone of, can someone from outside of your community trigger a book banning process, or do you have something in place that requires you to be a resident?
From my research that I've done on this, and I don't know how it would work for the library or schools, but a lot of this is being spread over social media. For us, a lot of people who complain on our to us or on our posts aren't even from this area, but from what I've been told, they are recruiting parents in the area to go to school boards, but they are feeding them information. I know that's how it's working a lot with like the Awake Illinois group. Like they have a large group and they look for people in different locations, and then they are providing the information for them to go forward to the school boards.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I've heard also, Kerry, is that a number of the politicians that we work with are telling me that this is very Koch founded. So there's a lot funded. There's a lot of funding from and very organized, and is coming from the outside, not from our communities at all. And you can see the data is very clear that this is not what Americans believe or want. It's being pushed at us.
And they're loud. And you're right,
I can
the organization.
tell you that we had an incident last week. An amazing school librarian from downstate started a TikTok, and she's been promoting books on TikTok. She promoted genderqueer on her TikTok, and this Twitter account called Libs of TikTok. Libs of TikTok.
Libs of Talk.
Yeah. They have 1.5 million followers. They put her stuff on their social media and put her on blast. And because of that, the local paper ended up doing an article on the fact that she was promoting genderqueer. And so something that was from outside of the community became something in the community because of that exposure. But her, just in case anyone's wondering, her community has rallied around her and really taken care of her, and she feels really supported. So that was just amazing to hear.
I'm glad to hear there was community support, because you definitely need that. So there was a question of, as professionals in the industry, do you all think we have reached a peak on banning, or will we see it to continue increasing?
I think it's going to keep on going. Yeah. I think it's only
100%,
growing.
100%.
Especially
we're
with the
not even at the
legislation that
beginning of
you're
this thing.
seeing, that it's just ramping up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Dominique, you were talking.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, we're at the beginning of this thing.
Yeah. I agree.
And I mean, this is a culture war. This is, and it's being waged against our children. It's being waged against our library. I have to imagine that if you're on this call, books meant something to you as a kid and libraries meant a great deal to you as a kid. I'm willing to bet that that's true of a lot of the people here. I learned to read in a library. I'm an immigrant, and who I became as a human being was forged in a library. So I really think we've got to defend American libraries. This is not, this is a war that's being waged against us and our children and I think democracy.
It makes a big difference. Like, I don't remember the library in particular, but I read a few articles about this a while ago. But like, for public libraries, our boards are elected. They're publicly elected. And so if people just decide not to go vote, that leaves, an opportunity for a lot of people with a certain agenda to come in and change all of that up. And there was a case where an entire board was pretty much usurped. And they slashed the library's budget, fired half of the people, and took books off shelves. And so very real. And I will find this, if people are interested, I will find this article and share it, because I don't want to just, I want to provide resources to what I'm saying. But yeah, there are very real consequences. And a lot of the people who are complaining and have issues with freedom of knowledge and knowledge accessibility are learning all of the ways to gain that power and gain that traction. So if the people who do support us remain silent, things kind of will just fall in the other direction, and it'll be too late to be able to do anything at a certain point. So it's really important to use our voices and do what we can in the voting booths and support our libraries as members of the community, make sure our voices are just as loud as the people who are trying to take the books off the shelves.
So kind of building on that, there was a comment in the question and answer that someone suggested that perhaps school counselors and school librarians could work together on these efforts and kind of build community there. So I wanted to make sure you all heard that, as it was a retired educator and former school counselor who suggested it.
Thanks for your input. I do work with my counselors, and I hope that my colleagues do too. Counselors are a great resource for us.
Awesome. Also in the comments, people were saying that they believe it's the Niles Public Library that Barbara was referring to.
Yep, that's right.
Yep.
Speaking of public libraries, there was a question saying that many public libraries have a diversity statement. Do you think they should include a diversity statement within their collection development policy as well?
I would say put a diversity statement everywhere you can. Support that cause. And in the collection development policy, you can definitely add that as part of your selection criteria section to make sure that you have like an EDI statement in there, so that you're actively promoting and providing resources for diversity and inclusion.
So one of the other questions was if you all could talk about the banning of Huckleberry Finn, or if you had any knowledge about.
I would love to take that one, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Because I get that a lot on the social media posts for our bookshop as well. And I think it ends up boiling down to the fact that, and I've had to jump in sometimes on some of our posts and say, I know what you're getting at. And yes, sometimes challenges and banning comes from both sides of the aisle. Not to the extreme that we're seeing it right now, which is mostly driven from one side of the aisle about certain social topics. But Huckleberry Finn and something like genderqueer being totally removed and pulled off of shelves, or genderqueer is a bad example because honestly, there's nothing else that's being challenged that's really like it. So let me take that back and say, I don't know, All Boys Aren't Blue being pulled off of high school shelves. The difference being that when Huckleberry Finn was challenged, parents were concerned that the language was outdated and that it pushed some outdated stereotypes, and they wanted it removed from curriculum. Because, it's been used for hundreds of years, or well, 100 years in our school curriculum. And the argument being that maybe it's time to start making room in our curriculum for other voices, authors of color, different perspectives. So, but it was never pulled out of classrooms or off shelves or not allowed to be checked out. Kids still had access to it. They still have access to it. It is still in the school library. So it's not quite the same. It was challenged for sure, but it wasn't banned or pulled off shelves the way that we're seeing a lot of books being done right now in large numbers. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about it.
Any other comments?
No, Kerry summed it up really well.
So Kristina, since you're talking, someone was asking, what was the book of fantasy with no magic?
Oh, well, there are a bunch of different directions you can go in with that. There's Ranger's Apprentice, the Flanagan stuff. There, the Disney After Dark stuff will actually work kind of too, because it's not the same kind of magic that we're talking about. I don't know. There are a lot of different ways you can go with that.
I'm sure that'll be helpful for the questioner. There was a question about that there have been a number of ban requests in Illinois schools, but very few have been successful. Does anyone have more recent numbers specific for Illinois?
I tried to find some today and I couldn't.
No, and we've just started trying to collect some of that data as an organization. But ALA finds that numbers skew really low because of low reporting, and it's hard to expect people to report it in a couple of different places. So I'm not sure how successful we'll be, but we are really trying to push it.
Excellent. I know reporting is always a challenge, and it's definitely an underreported data information for us all. So for our last question of the night, and this is a question for me because I want to know, what is your favorite banned book? And we'll start with Kerry.
I have two. I'm sorry. I can never just pick one book ever, anytime anyone ever asks me this question. One's old and one's newer. So To Kill a Mockingbird is my favorite book of all time, just like everybody else on the planet. And it is challenged and banned, or challenged a lot. And even though I understand people's desire to maybe not use it as a curriculum piece anymore, I still think it's just a beautiful piece of literature and I love it. And then my second one would be a more recent title. I kind of referenced it earlier. All Boys Aren't Blue. I never would have picked that book up, except that Governor Abbott threw a giant public fit about it in a news article I read. And so I'm like, okay, I have been seeing this book on the shelves selling out at the store for so long. So I picked it up, I read it, and I was transformed by it. I learned so much from it. And now I follow the author, George M. Johnson. Did I say that right? Did I get the right one? Yeah. I follow him on social media and he has made me such a stronger ally. And I have learned so much and I continue to learn so much from him. And I am just really grateful because it would not necessarily have been something I would have read, I think, unless, it had been banned. And it is no longer on shelves in Texas. So I'd like to send maybe 100 copies down there, but.
Barbara?
Well, it's pretty basic, but Harry Potter series through and through. They get banned every year, and I read it almost every year. So that's where you go. And another one would be the Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian.
So good.
Excellent.
The Harry Potter books are on my bookshelf behind me.
Yes.
Well, Kristina, since you're talking, what is your favorite band book?
Yeah, I'm reading Ashley Hope Perez's book right now, and I'm blanking on the title. Is it Into Darkness? Does anyone know? It's on
Oh,
the top 10 list.
is that the one that takes place in New Mexico
It's in Texas.
or Texas? Oh, what is
Mhm.
that called? I think you're right. Into Darkness or something.
I think it might be called Into Darkness, and it's fantastic. Like, it's really, really good. And I want to say it was number 3 or 4 on the banned books list this year. And Handmaid's Tale. I really like Handmaid's Tale. I love the way she wrote that, and so prescient these days. So
Excellent. And Dominique?
Oh, I think I'll pick 2 as well. And I'm gonna follow Dr. Weber. I'm a huge Atwood fan. I've had the privilege of having many meals with Margaret, and she is as extraordinary as you think she is. Let me just tell you that. So Handmaid's Tale absolutely would be on my list. Also on my list, The Hate We Give, which definitely helped me to, I mean, I just think that it's so important to just keep seeing things in new ways. I have like many. So a book we published called Me and White Supremacy, which is a workbook that you actually do, which really made me think hard about who I was and my own privilege and my own and the world that I think I know. And last but not least, Juno's This Book Is Gay is just one of my favorite books. It's just really, I'm really proud that we get to do that work with her. So yeah, loads. I've got loads. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share my favorite banned books too. Although Dominique, you took mine. I was going to say The Hate You Give. It's one of my all-time favorites. As is pretty much anything Jason Reynolds has written, ever, from middle grade, juvenile, all the way up to high school. I highly recommend his work, and it's been banned all across the country. And also This Book Is Gay. I got it before it was published. I got it as an advanced reader's copy. And it was the first time I had seen a pride flag proudly on a book cover. And it was really impactful right from the beginning, just with the cover, let alone the content. And I think that really goes to what we're talking about here today, that the content that people are trying to take away from our society can change lives. And that's where we as community members and activists can stand up and protect the future, is really what it boils down to. So thank you all for joining us here today. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our sponsors. And we will be sending out the recording as well as a ton of resources. So look for that email, and please, we look forward to seeing you in the future to continue to protect intellectual freedom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Good night, everybody. Good night.